Hi, I'm Maya. I asked my dad when the wedding was. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Why would you be there? It's not your place." They didn't just leave me out. They erased me, like I never existed. My name was scrubbed off papers. The house I thought I owned, signed away behind my back. And the ones who knew, they smiled, sat at my table, hugged my child, while stealing everything I had left. But what they didn't know is I wasn't done yet. I asked when the wedding is. I wasn't being sarcastic. I wasn't poking the bear or trying to make a scene. I asked because, well, it just felt like the decent thing to do. Even if I wasn't going to be there. Even if I knew, deep down, I wasn't really welcome. But his reply? It didn't come with hesitation or even a pause to consider the weight of his words. "Why would you be there? It's not your place." And just like that, I was erased. That's the thing about silence. People mistake it for peace, but sometimes silence is just the final nail. It's not calm, it's not agreement, it's exile. I didn't scream, I didn't throw the phone or sob into a pillow. I just sat there, alone in my kitchen, my coat still on, my bag still slung over one shoulder. It was 5:30. I had just gotten home from work. The light through the blinds painted these long stripes across the counter, and I remember how quiet everything was, like the world itself didn't want to interrupt the sound of a heart being shelved. The night before, I was just scrolling through Facebook, killing time, half watching the evening news. Tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones and makes even holding your phone feel like a task. That's when I saw it. Carla's engagement photos. There she was, in that flowy white dress she always swore made her look washed out. Her fiancé, Jordan, was kissing her temple in every other picture. Captions read, "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone we love." Everyone. Everyone, except me. No message, no call, not even a lazy group text. Just a glossy slideshow of filtered happiness and tagged names that didn't include mine. I remembered Thanksgiving. Aunt Rachel asking Carla if there was any news, and Carla smirking like a sitcom character. "Maybe soon," she had said, and glanced at Mom. That was the moment, wasn't it? The warning sign I ignored. This wasn't a surprise. Not really. It was confirmation. Proof I'd officially been carved out of the family portrait. I called my father the next morning. The sun hadn't even fully cleared the horizon. My hands were shaking, and I told myself it was just the coffee. I started casual, asked how he was, if he needed help fixing that gutter he mentioned last month. But the moment I brought up the wedding, his tone flipped. Cold, dismissive. "Why would you be there?" I swallowed. "Because I'm your daughter." He sighed like he was tired of the whole conversation before it began. "It's not about blood, Maya. It's about peace." That hit harder than I expected. Peace? You think this is peace? For years, I stayed quiet to keep that so-called peace, and now it was being used as the excuse to cut me off entirely. I sat with that, with all of it. The memories, the years, the thousands of moments that stitched me to them, unraveling in a single sentence. And I started thinking back. Back to when I was a kid, 10, maybe 11. Carla had lied about where she'd been that night, said she was studying with friends. I saw her sneaking back in at 2 a.m., reeking of tequila and bad decisions. I told Mom. That's when it began. The exclusion. The whispered talks I wasn't invited to. The jokes that didn't land unless I laughed along, even when they were at my expense. Belle, my mother, used to say, "Sometimes being quiet is the only way to be loved." But I wasn't loud. I wasn't rebellious. I was just observant, aware. I was the one who noticed when Belle started hiding bottles in the laundry room. The one who noticed Carla's missing cash that somehow always ended up in her purse again. I wasn't excluded because I was wrong. I was excluded because I knew too much. And now, I'm paying the price for having eyes wide open in a family that preferred to squint. On the table beside me was a chipped porcelain teacup, one of the only things I had left from Belle. She always made tea when life felt cruel. A ritual, almost. I picked it up, the crack along the rim fitting perfectly against my thumb. That little break always made it mine. "She'd be ashamed of what you've all become," I whispered. The words hung in the air like steam from the cup. I didn't throw the cup. didn't slam it against the wall. I placed it gently on the table, like it deserved better than we did. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for a seat at a table that kept pulling the chair out from under me. I whispered, to no one in particular, "Okay, I'll see myself out. Permanently." But fate has a funny way of pulling you back in, especially when they thought you'd stay silent forever. I didn't plan on walking past Hurlis's house. I was just out grabbing milk and some bread, leash in one hand, Sadie tugging me toward anything that smelled remotely like meat. It was that soft Kentucky evening light, the kind where the sun drops but heat lingers, and I was halfway through my usual loop when I saw it. Carla's car, parked neatly, like it belonged there, like she belonged there. That feeling again, the one that crept in every time I saw their lives happening on some schedule I never got the memo about. A calendar that somehow skipped over me. I slowed at the gate, Sadie sniffing along the hedges, tail wagging like it was any other Thursday. And that's when I heard them, not yelling, just voices, low, controlled. I paused, looked at the cracked window near the kitchen. Lights spilled out. Their silhouettes moved back and forth like old habits. I told myself I wasn't eavesdropping. I wasn't creeping or lurking. I was confirming. And I had every right to. Carla's voice cut through the quiet. "She's always been too intense. She ruins everything." Then Hurlis, his tone the same flat disappointment I'd memorized. "I just want peace. No more drama. She brings bad energy." I stood there frozen, not because I didn't believe it, but because I always had. I just needed to hear it. This wasn't about one wedding or one missed phone call. This was a policy, an actual, spoken-out-loud agreement to keep me out. Carla laughed, like they were talking about an old recipe that never worked. "Remember when she made Belle cry at Christmas?" "You don't come back from that," Hurlis said. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it left a metallic taste in my mouth. It wasn't negligence. It was design. They'd planned their silence like people plan a vacation, meticulous and mutual. And as the words floated out of that window, I realized they weren't even whispering, because in their minds, I wasn't close enough to matter. I kept walking. Didn't rush, didn't cry, just let Sadie lead us back toward the sidewalk. And as I walked, more memories surfaced. Graduation. The photographer asked everyone to scoot in, make room, but somehow, my seat had no label. "Must have been a mistake," they said. I ended up in the back row, half cut from the edge of the picture. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. The place cards lined up perfectly, except mine. "Oh, we thought you weren't coming," Aunt Rachel had said. My niece's birthday. 5 years old. I found out about the party 2 weeks later, on Facebook. "The invite must have gotten lost," Carla messaged me, adding a heart emoji at the end, like that softened anything. "You bleed a little each time. Paper cuts, one by one, until your whole body is leaking something no one else sees. When people exclude you long enough, they get used to the empty space, and maybe they even start to prefer it." I walked home without looking back, and I didn't need to scream or call anyone out. I just kept repeating to myself, not crazy, not dramatic, just awake now. My therapist once told me, "Some people don't break you, they erase you, quietly." Tonight, I finally understood what she meant. I didn't text Carla, didn't call Hurlis. I went inside, poured a glass of water, sat at my desk, and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote in bold letters, "What they say behind my back." It wasn't anger that moved my pen. It was clarity. Cold, clean clarity. If they wanted silence, they'd get it, but not the kind they controlled. My silence would be chosen. Sharp, intentional, and maybe for once, powerful. I flipped to the second page, began listing moments I had dismissed, brushed off, laughed through. Things I thought were accidental. Now, obviously not. Later that night, after Sadie curled at my feet and the house was still, I pulled out my old phone and found the one voicemail I hadn't deleted, Belle. Her voice was softer than I remembered. A little slurred, maybe, but still warm. "You always saw more than they wanted you to," she said. Just that. I held the phone to my chest and smiled. Not the kind of smile you show teeth for, just the kind that says, I'm still here. And maybe that's what they hated most. That I kept showing up, seeing through it, surviving in spite of it. I closed my notebook and whispered to no one. They planned their silence. Now I'll plan mine. I found it sitting on the welcome mat, a tan envelope, unmarked, heavy with something sharp inside, the kind of thing that makes your throat dry before you open it. I didn't want to touch it. My first thought wasn't curiosity. It was dread. Inside, a high-quality photo, 5/7 glossy, a family gathering, picnic tables, laughter in faces I used to love seeing. Even cousins from Iowa who seldom visit. The date written in neat handwriting. The weekend Carla told me she had food poisoning. I remember her voice trembling over the phone. I believed her. I believed I was just too busy or too far to attend. But there I was supposed to be. My usual seat, half hidden behind a floral centerpiece, occupied by a stranger. Someone smiling in my place, and everyone else smiling back. I stared until the edges blurred, my heart thumping, replaced, not excluded by chance, but by design. I compared that date on the back of the photo to my own calendar in the desk drawer. That Friday, I stayed late at work because Hurlis had asked me to fix a plumbing leak at his porch. I remember watching the sky lose light, thinking Carla would call me later. I never knew she was lying. I never knew that entire weekend was arranged without me. I thought about the voicemail I left that Sunday. I asked him, Dad, did we ever have that BBQ? He said nothing, just hissed, You must be mistaken. That's when I first sensed something crawling in the edges of my memory. Gaslight, maybe. They wanted me to doubt. I placed the photo onto my journal, opened a blank page, wrote the word proof. I traced my fingers over letters I knew by heart, the names, the place, the faces. Who sent it? An ally? Or someone tired of silence? I remembered the canceled BBQ text from Carla. Weather's rough. Dad said we'll cancel. That afternoon, I chased rain clouds across the horizon, waiting. My dessert melted in my bag on the porch steps. I told everyone I understood. Storms happen. But in the photo, skies were clear, blue, sun overhead. Everyone there but me. It made everything feel like betrayal written in daylight. Sitting on my couch, I felt numb first, then sting. Tears didn't come at once, felt too raw. I held the photo, breathing shallow, thinking about how people pretend to protect you by removing you, by rewriting your absence, by pretending mistakes are just misunderstandings. I muttered something to myself. Exclusion is cruel. Replacement is war. I didn't scream. I didn't bang anything. Just folded the photo carefully, slid it into a sealed envelope, tucked it under the mattress. Evidence. Something they can't erase. Then I opened the drawer where I kept old friends' numbers. Someone who knew me before everyone stopped calling. I dialed her after midnight. Hey, I need to talk. She didn't ask why, only listened. And that was enough. Later, I found an old voicemail from Mom. Her voice cracked but warm. You always saw more than they wanted you to. I pressed pause, listened again. It felt like her whisper was a torch in the dark. Something shifted. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't agree with what they did. Meet me tomorrow. I didn't know whether to be afraid or hopeful, but either way, I was going. I drove up that Saturday evening under a sky that glowed pink, then purple. The house smelled of jasmine and roast chicken, smoke curling from the chimney, ovens working overtime. I wasn't supposed to be there. Carla's text said, family dinner, just us catching up. But watching through the windshield, seeing neighbors I haven't seen in years, I realized catching up was another word for pretending nothing was wrong. Inside, the soft clink of silverware, low conversations. Judy greeted me with a forced smile, her voice high-pitched and light. Glad you could make it, she said. But her eyes didn't linger. She offered the platter I made, lavishly wood-burned, hand-stained, positioned near the entry. The card beside it said, From Sterling Delaney. Two names I knew weren't responsible for its labor. My chest tightened. Betrayal because this felt worse than omission. It was theft in front of everyone. On the living room wall, portraits of my mother, Belle, smiled back at me. And she taught me the wood grain, how every curve of the platter would hold history. This wood-burned platter was more than kitchenware. It was memory. When Carla rose to make a toast, I braced myself. She lifted her glass, addressed the room. Thank you to Sterling and Delaney for the lovely platter that set the tone tonight. Applause. Smiles. Her voice smooth, rehearsed. Oh, I saw moments. Cousins nudging each other. Judy's hands clasping. Hurlis raising his fork. Not one glance towards me. As though I were invisible. As though my work didn't matter. My mind replayed the hours I spent sanding, burning lines, mixing stain. My mother's recipe, her voice in my head. Each sketch, each brush of finish stolen. I forced a smile, clinked my glass. That platter means a lot because it's from my mother's recipe, I said, voice steady, though hands trembled. Carla blinked. Something like shock flickered. Then a controlled smile, the kind that taught me to watch people's jaws. And the table went quiet, eyes moved, guilt maybe, but no correction, no admission. I understood then, if I didn't claim this, if I stayed silent, I would continue to vanish. Later, after plates cleared, I walked into the kitchen. Heat from the oven lingered, steam rising. I saw the platter again, in the sink, cleaned, washed, but underneath, the tag property of Delaney Sterling was still taped. Faded masking tape. My name missing. My work claimed by someone else. I didn't rage. I didn't snap the tape off. I took out my phone, snapped a photo. The metadata showed date, time. Tonight, I saved it. Evidence. A cold file that asked more questions than it answered. Inside, I turned off every light except the porch lamp. I leaned against the door frame, felt the wooden grain of the door beneath my hand. Belle's words echoed. True craftsmanship is your voice when no one is listening. I held that memory close to silence. I didn't storm out. I didn't say a final word. I slipped into the night. Chapter 5. When evidence speaks louder than words. I woke up to the sound of package slips shuffling against the front door, sunlight spilling in thin ribbons through the blinds. One envelope stood out. Legal, heavy, stamped Morris County. My heart banged before I even tore it open. I almost left it on the kitchen counter, pretended it was addressed to someone else. But I didn't. I opened it. The deed was there. Clear description, survey lines, my name beside the property I thought was home. Except the name of the transferee, Carla, now stood replacing mine. The plot of land with the little oak tree in the backyard, the porch I built with my own hands, everything that anchored me, had been transferred without my knowledge. My hands trembled as I read the survey map, borders. I walked every morning were hers now, not just stolen acknowledgement, but outright ownership. I called Sterling after breakfast, under the guise of wanting clarification. He said paperwork must have been processed long ago, but his voice cracked. I asked when, who signed, where the document was filed. He said, "Go ask Dad." That cracked something inside me. A betrayal so silent you forget what trusting looks like until you see the proof ripping apart the truth you held. Memories came rushing. Conversations from months ago. Dad saying titles were just technical. Carla once mentioning cleaning up the family property paperwork. A comment I brushed away, assuming I'd be kept in the loop. My mother Belle used to tell me, "Keep records, daughter. Family's loudest when it's quiet." That phrase, once comforting, now echoed like an accusation. Inside, I felt two forces pulling, one telling me to walk away, to preserve what dignity I had left. The other burning so fiercely it was impossible to stay silent. If I let this go, I let them write a lie over my life. If I fight, I risk anger, more exclusion, maybe even loss of what few connections remain. But I knew justice wasn't sweetness, it was sweat, careful words, proof. Late afternoon, Annalise arrived. She brought envelopes, copies of emails, bank statements, the whole paper trail hidden for months. She said, "Sometimes you need someone to see the truth so you can see yourself again." Relief and grief mixed inside me. Tears burned. But this wasn't waterworks. It was clarity. I sat in Hurlius's study later, documents spread across the oak table. Light through the window flickered. I traced the deed with my finger. I traced the signatures. I compared tax records, county clerk entries. Everything pointed to deliberate erasure. And I understood. This isn't about property. It's about power. About who gets to write history and who gets silenced. Then I opened my laptop, drafts ready. I was going to file a claim, but an email notification popped up. Sign this document and I'll drop the case against the neighbor. From Carla. My eyes narrowed. Was this a peace offering or a trap? I stared at the screen. I breathed. Evidence was no longer paper. It was leverage. And I was no longer waiting to be acknowledged. I was preparing to be heard. I got the phone call just after lunch. A neighbor's voice, urgent. Dad collapsed. Paramedics are here. My hands froze around the steering wheel. Judy, Carla, Sterling, they were already there when I pulled into the driveway, faces tight with something I couldn't read. But not one of them had called me first. Not one had said, "We need you." They acted like I was a spectator arriving late to my own family's crisis. When the doctor said it was a mild stroke, just precautionary, I felt a cold wash over me. A mild stroke. But this wasn't mild to me, because it reminded me that life doesn't wait for apologies. Opportunity doesn't pause. Family doesn't heal just because someone said the words. And I asked quietly in my head, why wasn't I contacted directly? I followed the ambulance lights to the hospital. Traffic crawled. My heart pounded so loud I thought someone would hear it in all this distance. Inside the ER waiting room, I saw people I used to trust. Aunts pressed phones to ears, cousins whispering. But when the doctor came through the doors, making announcements about vital signs, Carla and Judy weren't there. Sterling appeared a few minutes later, avoiding my eyes. "No, Maya, I'm sorry. No, I called." Just tight silence and sidelong glances. "Is someone from the family here?" I asked a nurse. She didn't know my name, just said, "I'll check." All I could feel was humiliation, like I was invisible even in someone else's tragedy. Later, I tried to post, "Dear friends, if loved, I stood by when no one else came." I watched as the screen loaded, saw the world scroll up, and the post flagged, blocked. Family whispers, not wanting family drama. "Don't air this." Silence demanded again. They have always told me I overreacted, that I made problems where none existed. When I spoke up about missing invites or wrong names, jokes were made. "You're too sensitive. You're imagining things." Now here I was, standing next to a hospital bed, proof in hand, and still told to stay quiet. Beside Dad's bed, machines ticking, monitors beeping, I held Belle's old teacup. I remembered her voice in those quiet moments saying, "Being ignored is a way of being forgotten." How many times had I done the dishes, fixed that drip in the bathroom, shoveled snow off the porch, silent labor that no one saw? How many times had I smiled at dinner, even though I wasn't seated, spoken up only to be answered by blank faces? Something broke inside me. Enough of being erased. Not by words, not by distance, not by courtesy. This was a turning point. I felt resolve sharpen inside like glass. I cleared my throat. I looked at Sterling, Carla, Judy, all standing awkward. I said, "I deserve to be here." My voice was quiet, but it shook the room. They shifted. Hurley's turned his face away. Judy's lips curved, but no apology came. Then I pulled out the deeds, the photos, everything I'd gathered. Evidence spread across my lap. Truth laid bare. I saw them flinch. I saw surprise. I saw the calculations behind their masks. My phone vibrated. Another message, from someone I didn't expect, someone close. They said, her response was unexpected, a lie with a trembling voice. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I arrived that evening out of habit more than hope. Carla's text had said it was just a small catch-up, but I knew better. Family gatherings in this house always had an agenda, and lately, that agenda had me at the center of a storm I didn't start. The driveway was already full, the porch buzzing with laughter that didn't reach my bones. Inside, the dining room was warm, overlit. Wine glasses clinked. Uncle Marcus cracked one of his usual lines. You know, trust is like glass. Once it's cracked. He didn't finish, but the laughter that followed said enough. They weren't jokes. They were warnings. Judy and Carla kept their tone light, their smiles even. But when I casually brought up something about house title confusion, they exchanged a glance sharp enough to cut glass. They weren't hiding it anymore. They were daring me. After dinner, when the plates were scraped clean and the air grew heavy, Judy tapped my arm. Come walk with me, she said. We stepped into the hallway near the coat closet, away from the noise. She looked at me with what might have passed for maternal concern if I hadn't seen the flicker of steel in her eyes. Don't post anything, Maya, she said quietly. Not about your father, not about the property. Some truths are better kept quiet. For everyone's sake. She smiled after that like it was advice, not a threat. But her hand gripped my elbow just a second too long. Her voice had the same syrupy calm they used on me as a child when I cried too loudly. I said nothing, because what do you say when your own stepmother is telling you, once again, to disappear? Back in the living room, I felt the weight in my coat pocket shift. Annalisa's envelope. She had texted an hour before, saying she'd stop by. And she did, slipping in like she belonged there, nodding politely to guests who had no idea what she carried. She walked up to me, handed over the folder. You ready? She asked. I opened it slowly. Inside, tax records, survey maps. The title deed, old but valid, bearing my name, not Carla's, not Sterling's. Mine. I raised my eyes. Nobody was talking anymore. Judy's hand froze over her wine glass. Sterling's head tilted like he couldn't believe what he saw. Carla stood absolutely still. This, I said aloud, stepping forward so everyone could hear, is the original deed. It never left my name. The bank statements, the property tax, I've been paying them, quietly, because I believed silence meant peace. My voice didn't shake. It didn't even rise. But it landed like a hammer. You stood in front of people, I continued, and claimed what wasn't yours. You erased me with a smile. Carla opened her mouth. That's not... It is, I said, cutting her off. And this folder, isn't opinion, it's fact. You can argue with me, but not with the county clerk. Sterling looked down at his shoes. Judy said nothing. Hurley's shifted in his chair, avoiding everyone's eyes. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't crying, and still, they looked at me like I had thrown the table over. I saw guests murmuring, their faces turning. Some leaned in, others sat back like this wasn't their war, like they didn't want the blood on their hands. Do you remember, I asked, quieter now, when you told me I was too emotional, too reactive, that I always made things harder? Carla wouldn't look up. Judy's expression had calcified. But I wasn't done. You said I imagined things, that no one was trying to erase me. But I have proof now. I have voice. And I'm not asking you to believe me anymore. I'm showing you. For the first time in years, I felt taller than the ceiling, seen, real, not edited down to difficult or overly sensitive. Then Carla stepped aside, pulled out her phone, and walked toward the front door. I could still hear her voice as she whispered, Yes, tell them you have something, but not everything. And right then, I knew. This wasn't over. The parking lot outside the community hall was packed. Cars lined up across the gravel, kids darting between legs, women balancing covered dishes. The banner over the entryway read, Family Neighbors Appreciation Day, with Carla's name in cursive beneath it. Of course. I stepped inside, folder pressed close against my ribs. Laughter and chatter filled the air, the kind that masks things too messy for polite company. Faces I hadn't seen in years turned my way with surprise, some with warmth, others with that familiar pause, like they were unsure which version of me they were supposed to acknowledge. I walked past tables covered in crock-pots and plastic cups, past Judy pretending to refill sweet tea, past Sterling talking sports with a neighbor. Carla stood on the makeshift stage, beaming like a local politician. She was thanking everyone for their support, their love, their faith in family. She gestured behind her as if she'd built the entire community hall herself. And to those who helped with the renovations, our home has become a place of pride again, she said, because family builds things together. That was it. I walked toward the front. My palms were dry, my breath steady. I didn't ask for the mic. I didn't need it. I lifted the folder and began speaking. This house you've all admired, I said, holding up a printed copy of the title deed, was never hers to renovate. Heads turned. The room, already buzzing, shifted into something else. Slower, quieter, heavier. This is the legal record, I said, unfolding page after page. Survey maps, tax documents, recorded correspondence. Every inch of that house, my house, has been paid for, maintained, and legally owned under my name. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I held up a photo, the envelope from the county office, date-stamped, addressed to me. This isn't hearsay. This isn't family gossip. This is proof. Phones were out, cameras recording. I didn't need to yell. Carla stood frozen behind the podium, the microphone still in her hand. Maya, she finally said, voice cracking slightly, this isn't the time. No, I said, it never was. But this is the only time you made room for me, and I'm taking it. Her composure shattered. You don't understand what you're doing. You're tearing us apart. I stared at her. You did that. When you lied, when you pushed me aside and smiled like it was charity. She tried to say more, called me obsessed, said I was acting out, but her voice broke in places she couldn't hide. Tears welled up, but they weren't sorrow. They were frustration, control slipping. Judy didn't speak. She stood near the back, eyes locked on the floor. Hurley stood with arms crossed, lips tight. No one stepped forward to stop me, and I didn't stop, because for once, I wasn't the difficult one. I wasn't the overreactor. I was just right. As Carla's meltdown unraveled, I thought of something Belle once told me. Some people hope the truth never speaks louder than their charm. The crowd had changed. I could feel it. Some guests nodded. Others whispered to each other, glancing toward Carla like they didn't know who she was anymore. I wasn't their problem anymore. I was the mirror they couldn't avoid. Sterling approached her slowly, tried to lead her off the stage, but she pulled away, breathing heavy. I stood quietly, the weight of months, years, settling off my shoulders. Then, my phone buzzed. I looked down. Unknown number. I answered anyway. A voice I hadn't heard in a while, someone close to Carla. She knows, they said. Everything, but she's not going down without taking you first. My fingers tightened around the phone. The room kept buzzing, people murmuring, the smell of barbecue and potato salad lingering in the air. But suddenly, none of that mattered. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. This was war. The chaos faded quicker than I expected. After the reunion, after the video made its quiet rounds through church circles and neighborhood Facebook groups, after all the whispered gasps and awkward questions, there was only silence. Not a word from Carla, not a text from Judy, not even a voicemail from Hurley's. That silence had weight, not the kind that settles, it hovers, the kind you feel in the space between dinner plates and closed blinds. I sat on the porch that night, the same one I scrubbed with my own hands, paint still chipped in the corners no one else seemed to notice. I looked out across the yard, listening to the cicadas, breathing in that thick Kentucky air. It was the first time in months I didn't brace myself for a phone call. Silence can be louder than screams. It's not peace. It's the absence of effort. The next evening, I walked alone to the park, that same crooked bench near the lake. The one my father took me to when I was 12, after I'd made honor roll and no one else remembered. He handed me a keychain that day, a brass one with a cracked red stone in the center. He said it symbolized doors only blood could open. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now it felt like a chain. I pulled it out of my jacket pocket. It had dulled over time, the stone nearly faded to gray. I ran my fingers over it, just once. Then I dropped it into the lake. Watched the ripples spread outward until they vanished. That was the moment I knew I wasn't chasing them anymore. I wasn't chasing the father who only showed up for public praise. I wasn't chasing Carla's approval, Judy's affection, or the myth of the good daughter I spent years trying to live up to. I was done. I went home, poured myself a cup of tea, and let the stillness settle. The phone rang a few nights later. It was Belle. "You holding up?" she asked, voice soft, like she knew the silence too. "I'm better than I've ever been," I told her. Then I paused. "Thank you for loving me like I mattered." She didn't answer right away, but I could hear her smile on the other end. Annalisa stopped by with banana bread the next morning. She didn't say much, just hugged me, tight, no questions, just presence. Family isn't about who shares your name, it's about who shows up without being asked. I started volunteering down at the women's shelter by the courthouse. Nothing grand, just offering legal advice, explaining documents, helping someone understand a lease before signing it. Every time I sat across from a woman unsure of her worth, I saw pieces of myself, past versions, younger ones, bruised but still standing. I didn't move away like I planned. I stayed in the home they tried to erase me from, stayed in the yard I once begged to feel like mine, stayed because this place wasn't just history, it was soil I finally had a right to plant in. One day, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name handwritten across the front. Inside, a note from a cousin I barely knew. "You gave some of us the courage to look closer," it said. No name, just that. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call anyone. I just sat by the window, letting the words settle. A week after, my voicemail blinked with a message from Hurlius. "You got what you wanted. Happy now?" I didn't call back. Instead, I sat at my desk that night and wrote a letter I never intended to send. "I forgive you," I wrote, "for not being who I needed, but I won't forget that I survived anyway." No revenge, no final strike, just truth and distance. Sometimes that's all the justice you get. Sometimes it's more than enough. It's strange what healing looks like. It's not neat. It doesn't come with violins or a slow fade out. It's choosing to stay when running would have been easier. It's hosting your own cookout on the porch. Your name is finally on. It's making peace with the quiet. Knowing no one else gets to define what peace is anymore. Sometimes you win by walking away. Other times, you win by staying and healing in the house built from your own broken pieces.